All right, cool. Jeff, come on up. So Jeff obviously is someone I trust with so much. I mean, and he said to me, he's like, hey, I have a really good friend that you have to have speak at your event. So I just said, boom, it's done. If he can make it, then I'm putting it in. So I thought it would be more fitting for Jeff to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. David Turner. And I'm totally excited. I'm going to be back here taking notes. And here you go, bro.
Awesome. Thank you, Ed. Great job, James, as well. Everything this morning has been great. Very tactical, intense morning so far, which has been awesome. But I'm really excited about bringing David up here in a moment to share, give us a little breather on the tactical side and be more, I think, more visionary, strategic. Some of what we learned with Jesse last night, where it wasn't the tactical part, but yet that was one of the best parts of the day from what I heard from talking to y'all yesterday. David has been a friend for a long time now and very close to me. I call on him for advice in every area of my life. Specifically business recently, he's helped me with the merger acquisition we just went through. He's had thousands and thousands of employees, grew his company to hundreds of millions of dollars, recently sold it, and relocated his family from Arizona here to Atlanta. So when I knew this event was literally 15 minutes, well, when traffic it was 3 hours, I think, to get here from David's house, I thought, what an amazing opportunity to have David share today. He doesn't normally speak in rooms like this, so you can tell he's dressed the best dressed man in the room, which is a good thing, right? And I love that. He inspires me in so many things. And today I'm excited to hear him, just as Ed was saying, to hear his success story, to hear some of the wisdom that he has. His company that he built, this is what's on your tables out there, as well as his book. Suntree is the name of his company. And I won't steal his thunder on what they did there. I'm not sure what he's getting into with that, but this is going to be a great session. I just want to share too, I got to spend the night at David's house last night, and I got to sleep in Oprah's room. Yeah. So not many times I can say that in my life. David, when he moved here, completed the largest, I think, residential real estate purchase in Georgia history. He bought a gentleman named Tyler Perry his home. And Tyler had a room designed just for Oprah, so I got to sleep in Oprah's bed last night. But the room was designed to look exactly like her bedroom where she lived. So anyway, just a little tidbit of information. I don't get to say that too often, that I slept in Oprah's room last night. But
was it comfortable?
Very comfortable. I slept great. So
Oprah there?
Oprah was not there. That's a good question. So anyway, I don't want to keep talking. I don't want to take any more time up from David. Please give a warm welcome to David Turner. Thank you.
Good afternoon. How are y'all doing today? I don't know if that's the blessing or the curse that I get the right before lunchtime, but you know, we'll take what they'll give. Amen. I'm going to give you a little bit of a brief background on my life. Very apropos, I entitled what I'm going to share today, A Different Perspective, because my life has been a completely different perspective. I think very differently, and this time we spend together is going to be a highly different perspective of probably what you've been hearing and all the specifics and strategies of what you're doing. So I'm going to encourage you today. This is more of business-minded. I'm actually, I've been in business since I'm a very young boy. I'll share about that. But I'm also a Christian evangelist today. I travel all over the world, so you'll hear a drop of that in the way I speak, but this will be about business and what we've learned in our lives and how it can apply. But I really believe that this is life-changing material, and it's more about the vision, philosophy, and who we are, and then it applies and carries in through everything that we do. So I'll tell you right now, I didn't come here to sell you anything, didn't come here to ask you for anything. I'm just here to bless your life. People say that when I speak, it's like drinking from a fire hose. So I can tell you right now, if you ask, no, I won't slow down. My whole objective today is to just share a little bit about the wisdom from my life and business and what I've done, so that it inspires and encourages you to a point where you'll want to read my book. And again, there's no ulterior motive in that, because I'm giving you the book for free. It's on the table. It's called Seeds of Faith, which I'll talk about. Because if you're encouraged enough in your life and you read that book, the book is a life-changing experience and takes you through the journeys I lived. But it's very much about all the things that I've experienced, and it'll change your life. So that's why we're here today. Just in a brief testimony of my life, I was born in a Jewish family, and my father left when I was 1 year old. My mom remarried a stepfather that drank a six-pack and beat us on a regular basis. So I learned to fight for life and be a pretty strong kid very early on. Learned a lot of lessons through that. I hate phoniness and hypocrisy. I'm very clear, very to the point. What you see is what you get. And it transpired through my whole life. When I was 8 years old, I had a vision, and in that vision, what I saw was that, you know, when you're a kid, you have all the time in the world to do what you want, but you don't have any money or any authority. But when you're older, you have all the authority, you just have no time and no money. So I sacrificed at that point my whole childhood. I realized that was a waste of my time and just wanted out. So I started literally working, going to school and working full-time by the time I was 9 years old. Worked all the way up through high school, to the point where I left high school a year early after 11th grade, advanced placed into college, graduated with a business degree in 2 years, and started my first business when I was 19 years old. So I was just pushing life away and wanting to get everything going. My whole idea was that I could take that time that wasn't a lot of fun and work hard now so I could play a lot later, which has partially worked out. My first restaurant was a little New York deli called Heaven on Rye, and it was a 40-seat restaurant. I had worked in restaurants most of my life and had that for about 3.5, almost 4 years. Worked 100 hours a week, night and day, and 7 days a week. Mostly didn't know what time it was, but just persevered through that. I think at that time, I had about 20 employees, and I think if I had worked at McDonald's, I could have made about triple the amount of money I made when I sold my restaurant. 3.5 years later, I think I walked away with about $75,000 after all expenses. But what I learned, both in that process when I was 8 years old and through this restaurant that I applied, was something that is not very appreciated today, but that was being willing to have delayed gratification in my life. Work hard now, expecting to get something later. So it was an amazing experience. I think I made about $1 an hour or less, but it set me up for the lessons of my life. We're going to come back to the delayed gratification, but it was a very interesting perspective and point that really changed everything in my life, and we'll come to that. The second business, after I sold my restaurant, I went out to Los Angeles. I had been in New Jersey with my restaurant and was schooling. I went out to Los Angeles, and this is where you're going to see a different perspective in the products that I've sold, in the businesses that I've run. I always look for something old with something new, which again, we're going to come to that. But, you know, it was amazing because when I went to Los Angeles, I said, you know, coming from New York, why are there no hot dog carts out here? You know, in New York, they're on every little corner. And it turned out it was illegal because all the people who own those very big buildings sell expensive restaurant space to the people who are renting, who want to put in restaurants, and they're paying all this money. When you pull up with a hot dog cart, they don't appreciate losing business. So they complain to the landlords, who complain to their friends, who are very political, and the city outlawed it. So when I came to LA, it was illegal to have hot dog vending carts. And I had a premise, which was the state allowed it, but the city didn't allow it. Well, just like a federal law can't be overruled by a state law, not that they're not trying today, but it's illegal to overrule a federal law with a state law. The same thing, a city can't overrule a state law. So the state allowed for vending, the city did not. So that was my premise. I went in and I fought the city for 2 years, bought these hot dog carts, put them all over downtown. It was during amnesty in late 1980s, and I had 5 hot dog carts making about $1,000 a day, and it was finally had something that was working for me. It was an amazing fight. I would go from cart to cart fighting with the city, but it was an infraction, not a misdemeanor, so they couldn't arrest me for it, basically. All they could do was cite me, and then my lawyer would get it dismissed. My downfall was that I won my case after 2 years. I saw it coming because everybody was pouring into downtown, and they were on the edges, but they couldn't encroach on my territory. Well, when I won my case, it opened it up, and every person with an illegal hibachi was on every corner selling hot dogs in Los Angeles. So I went back into the city, and I was like, you guys are so stupid. All you have to do is, instead of outlawing it, license 4 spots in the city, bid it out. You can make them beautiful carts, sets the standards, make money on it, and now it'll allow you to keep everybody else out. But in true form of politics, they said, aren't you the one who caused all of our problems? So why should we listen to you? So that was the end of hot dog cart vending for me and my story in LA. But I wanted to be in food, but no longer retail food. So again, looking at things differently, I started a company called Southwest Commodities, which was importing and exporting nuts and dried fruits from all over the world. It was a brokerage company, but at the time, a brokerage, for example, if you've heard of Blue Diamond almonds, instead of a salesman for Blue Diamond, they would have a broker who you just call them and they would parrot whatever the parent company had to say. So I saw an opportunity because people would basically just promote their own position. So if you own 50 truckloads of apricots coming from Turkey, you're not going to tell your customers the market's dropping because your inventory is going to be worth a lot less. So I figured out how to start a brokerage where I represented, for instance, 40 almond growers or 10 cashew suppliers from around the world. And since I didn't own the inventory, what I was really selling was honest information. And I would help buyers, and it was like playing poker, except they allowed me to walk around the table and see everybody's cards. A seller knows what he has to sell, but he doesn't know what anyone else has to sell or what anyone else has to buy. A buyer might know what he has to buy, but he doesn't know what anyone else needs to buy or what anyone else has to sell. So I knew everybody's inventory and what everyone's needs were in this niche industry. So I could come around and it'd be amazing. You could just listen to my phone in my office, and based on whether the calls were coming in for buyers or sellers, you could tell whether that market was going up or down. It was almost like a legalized insider trading, but it's in raw markets, not traded on the exchanges. So, my thought was if I could have $5 million a year in sales and not have to go out and get a real job, life would be good. And that first year, I did over $50 million in sales in my business. And then I grew that company to about $165 million in sales, started a manufacturing company called SunTree, where once again, with a different perspective, I would take in nuts, competing with like a Planters or a Fisher Nut, names you've heard of. We mostly did private label processing. We would take in nuts and we would oil roast, dry roast. We had chocolate coating, manufacturing of products, and then retail packaging. So if you've been to Costco and you buy the Kirkland brand, we would pack a good amount of the nuts for Kirkland. Trader Joe's, Aldi, Kroger, people like that, when you go into the nut departments and it says their brand on there, it would really be us packing it for them. So private label. We also had our own brand, which is called SunTree, and you've got that on the tables too. You'll like that even more than the book, but make sure you're ready for something that's a lot like an Oreo cookie. And I'm going to share about that business in just a couple minutes about, again, the different perspective of how I came up with unique products and the ideas and what we had. So as I say, that was my history in business. I sold 2 years ago both of those companies, SunTree and Southwest Commodities. They were about $250 million in sales, and a private equity firm from Dallas came and set me free, and I was able to I was able to sell those companies and be able to move on. So right now, as I was saying, I'm a Christian evangelist, write books. I also have a farm. We're still in business with a farm and with other investments, and I'm going to tell you about how special that is in just a little bit. Couple things I wanted to share. The first thing is about wisdom in life, because if I can encourage you anything, it's great to get statistics and ideas and specifics on a certain business. I always fought for wisdom in my life. You know, when people come to me for a job, they want to know how much I'll pay them right away and what are the benefits. But what I would do is in my life, I look for people who are geniuses in their field, who know what they're talking about. And what I do is I offer to serve them and work for nothing, so that I can glean their knowledge, because, again, making nothing on the front end, but you make millions on the back end once you really learn. So acquiring wisdom and acquiring knowledge was the biggest thing of my life. It wasn't about a certain product or a certain way that I marketed it. I always tell people, wisdom is a whole lot of, boy, I'll never do that again. So we spent a lot of time figuring that out the hard way. I have 2 kids, a son and a daughter, and I spent their whole lives telling them, do you want the lesson or do you want the experience? You know, in our life, that's very important, because, you know, I have, in my 2 kids, you know, you see all sides of you when you have kids. A few of you mentioned you had kids. It's amazing. I have a daughter who it feels like she has to fall in every pothole and every pit there is and climb out of it. And I have a son who just listens quietly. He gleans the wisdom, and he goes 10 times as fast because he's gleaning all the life lessons without having to have the experience and the circumstances and ramifications that comes from every one of those. So that's very important in life. I always say wisdom is the ability to apply the knowledge, experience, and the common sense insights and understandings that you have. So taking all those things and being able to use them. Wisdom, which is what we acquire as we grow. It's knowledge, and it is guided by our understanding that we have. So that's very important to gain wisdom in your life. It's never about the short term. I always tell people, your destiny has to determine your direction. Your direction shouldn't determine the destiny of your life. Very important to understand that. So many people, they're running around scattered, and their life is happening to them, as opposed to having a plan, having a roadmap, and being able to make it happen. Talking about vision is very important. I tell people about timing all the time. Long versus short timing. You know, and in a few minutes I'm going to share about farming and what I've gotten into now. But you know, if you do short crops, basically row crops they're called, you can buy the land, put in the irrigation, you can start farming. Within 9 months, you've got your first crop, you're selling something. But most of the people who do row crops, they make nothing, they make $200, $400 an acre. And it's always a struggle, and you're hoping to guess and plant the thing that someone else didn't plant and hope the market goes up. But when you have orchards, which is what we have now, we have a pistachio orchard, it's 2,300 acres, and I'm going to share that story. In an orchard, you don't make $1 for 7 years, all you do is put money into it. But the moment it produces, it returns 100% a year for the next 93 years, because it's a 100-year orchard. So we have pistachio trees. It takes $10 million to put this farm in, and it will literally make $10 to $12 million a year easily after 7 years. Why is it that you can have such a return like that? It's too easy. And the answer is this: because nobody's willing to be patient. Everybody is looking for a business, looking for an investment where it returns to me today. I make money by tomorrow what I put in today. I'm waiting 7 years for that return, working hard developing it, but knowing that it's going to bring me these massive returns. We're 2.5 years away from our first crop. And I admit, I can't wait to get there. But you see, it's long-term thinking versus short-term thinking in your life. And so many people, I would say, these are things that were so common sense to me, but it's radical thinking in today's world where everyone's trying to figure out what I get today and what I can have right now. So, you know, I tell my kids it's the same thing. Sometimes you don't go to school, you're gonna delay gratification. You could make, you know, $20 an hour right now and you're thinking that's great, but you're gonna hit a ceiling versus what you can do over here if you put in the time and the effort. So very important with that. I always tell people it's important to set a trend, not to follow a trend. So, and you'll see even with these products, I'm always thinking of ideas. I know today it's very popular, you know, let's look at Amazon, let's see what the #1 seller is. Oh, then we're going into coconut oil because it's #1 right now, and moving through those products. But I always found in my life, you know, it always made me a follower. So what I did is I took the risks, I jumped off the bridges. I wasn't looking for the 10% return and just kind of, you know, when I went to Hawaii, I was on a boat, and you saw these dolphins, and they called it drafting. They just get in behind on these catamarans, and they're drafting, so they're relaxing in the water, and the momentum is pulling them. Drafting is great if you want to be very mediocre in your life. I always learn to be out on the cutting edge and figuring out what's next and setting the trend in the things that I've done. The other vision that I had when I was younger, which is interesting, was, you know, when you sit on the ocean, I used to sit on my grandmother's dock. They were very wealthy, we were not. I mean, the most my family ever made was $20,000 a year when I was growing up. But we had a grandmother who was wealthy and didn't help us much, but we would get to visit. I'd sit on the dock of the ocean, and I'd look out, and there would be these waves. And sometimes you look out and it looks so calm, and then all of a sudden a big wave would hit the beach. Sometimes you'd look out and it looked like a huge wave was coming, but it would peter out to nothing. And sometimes it would just roll through. And I understood in that moment, it's the same with the lives of people. Some people look like a real big shot and really hot early on from a distance, but as soon as it gets near, it peters out to nothing. Some people just roll through the medium in life, but then there is the opportunity that we look like nothing and it seems very quiet, and then all of a sudden we hit the beach with a big splash. So it's all perspective in life on what it is you want to do and where you're going. So very important to understand that. So setting the trend. I tell people all the time, it's very important to be a dreamer, to have a vision, to have a plan. But I know thousands of people who dream, and all it is coffee talk conversation. They never do anything with it. So you can't go far without a vision, but if all you have is a vision and you're not a builder, you're gonna come in with a bunch of sticks and you're gonna have brick and wood and some nails, and you're just gonna start hammering all over the place. What I see in people's businesses, I was very strategic and very specific in what I tried to do. What I see all the time is people, because it's almost a wrong goal. They just want to survive, make money, do whatever it is they want. And so it's not one specific thing that they were called for and meant for. It's anything that'll work for me. So they're hammering stuff up all over the place. And at the end of the day, you got a bunch of partially built buildings that really take you nowhere. Instead of having a vision and a plan and then building a foundation under it. So I was always a visionary, but a foundation builder. I always had to have a plan. I always had to have timing, specifics, and I was always gearing towards something with goals and accomplishments. So it's very important to see that. Otherwise, you just get lost and you don't even know what you're doing or why you're doing it very quickly. I tell people all the time that you have to have one vision and many missions. Whether you're the head of a family, head of a company, whatever it is. The biggest problem I always had was I had the vision, but I had hundreds of employees, and transferring that vision, because people come in and they talk about, you know, you're gonna give them a job and they're gonna make money from you. The problem is they usually come in with their own ideas and their own ways. So if it's better, I would always take it from people. But a lot of times they start drifting into their own directions. Before you know it, you've got people pulling in different directions that their goals and their vision are very different. So it's important, I always say, one vision, many missions. All the missions have to support the vision that you've been given and that we're all accomplishing the same thing. Otherwise, I used to tell my managers, I feel like we're in a boat. We're in a canoe out in the ocean, and I got 4 people rowing with me. I got 4 people with their oars up, and I got 4 people that are rowing in the other direction. We're going nowhere. So getting people, and that, like I say, it pertains to family, business, employees, in everything, try to get everybody on the same page with the same vision, and you'd be amazed at the power of the mindset of what can be accomplished with those people when you're all doing that together. So I make sure I have a vision and I make sure that I'm sharing that vision and that everybody's on board for it. You know, I have people who tell me, you know, they can take me 200 miles an hour in the direction. I tell them that's great, but if I'm going east and you're taking me 200 miles an hour west, it's not really that useful. So people who can move you is great, but they got to be able to move you in the direction you want to go. The next thing I want to share with you is, I call it something old with something new. So these products are not only for tasting, but I wanted to give you as an example. So in my business, the nut business was booming. All of you know, very healthy, almonds, walnuts, pistachios, cashews. It's healthy food, it's great for you. The last 25 years, I hit a booming cycle in our business, which was interesting. It was also an industry which was neat because it was recession-proof. When times get tough, people don't want to go to movies and eat at restaurants where a steak is $60, but they'll sit at home and they'll buy more snacks. So the worse times get, the better my business did. And that's one thing I want to encourage you is, are you filling a need or a want in the business? Whatever you're trying to sell, I still am very old-fashioned where I believe in finding out what people need. You know, my grandfather was in the used auto parts, and he was in the food business. You know, he always said, you know, when times get tough, people are still going to eat. And when time gets tough, people stop buying new cars. They need a lot more car parts. So you have to think about what business you're in. I have so many friends, they talk to me about this beautiful little ice cream shop that they want to put at the local mall. And I'm telling them, waste of time. You know, maybe you'll make money for a few minutes, but the minute people's pocketbook gets tight, you know, they'd rather go to the store and they want to drown their sorrows in a gallon ice cream for what you're charging them for this little cup. It's not going to continue. So we have to understand if we're filling needs or wants. Within the products, so I'm in an industry that's booming in the nut and dried fruit business, and it's growing tremendously. But when I would go to people like Costco and Walmart and all these places, I'd have a better price, 5% less. I'd tell them I'm going to give them, you know, because I'm buying better, I'm more efficient. I would tell them I'm going to give them better quality, better service. And I was run out the door. I thought everybody wanted to save money, and it's actually not true. Most people, as much as they want to save money, laziness takes over, and they're lazy. The brand they know, the products they know, that's what they generally stick with. So just coming in a few cents better selling a product is not going to do it for most people. So what I learned is I had to go into a customer, a buyer, and I had to show them how was I going to expand their market. So for example, the products that I have here, so I'm selling almonds, walnuts, pistachios, roasted nuts, mixed nuts, and it all sells very well. But as soon as you start doing line extensions, all it does is it pilfers from the original item. So you're just selling more shelf space, more SKUs, and creating more confusion for the consumer. So what I learned is I had to show buyers and customers how I could expand their market. So I thought to myself at the time, well, who doesn't eat nuts? Well, it seemed like everybody was eating healthy nuts. And then it hit me, kids don't eat nuts. What do kids eat? Kids eat Oreo cookies, Nilla wafers, Chips Ahoy cookies. So what I did is, at that time, again, this is a different perspective, something old with something new, is how my mindset always worked. So Oreo cookies is a $2 billion a year business just for Oreos. So what I did is I went in and I took an almond, I coated it with the white center just like an Oreo cookie, and then I actually took Oreo cookie crumbs and coated it on the outside. So that's what you have there. I dare you, if you eat them, to just eat one. So as long as you can take the sugar, which by the way is better than an Oreo cookie. So we created these Oreo cookies, and I knew kids would love it. But then what I do? Well, you still got to sell it to moms. So I added a day's worth of calcium to the white center that you can't taste, but it gives it a nutritional reason to buy it. And it's half the sugar of an Oreo cookie. So it's got half the sugar, it's got the nutrition of the almond, it had the calcium, and kids loved it because it tasted just like an Oreo cookie. I worked on it for a couple of years, perfected it, and then once I had Oreo cookies, I had Nilla, because banana Nilla, then I had strawberry cheesecake with honey graham cracker crust. And so we made a whole line extension, and it took off. The beauty of these products also, let's say an almond was $3 a pound. So you buy it for $3, you process it, you sell it for $3.50, you're making 20 cents a pound with heavy manufacturing. Well, all of a sudden, I'm putting ingredients on a $3 ramen that cost about 70 cents a pound. That's cutting my cost in half. Now I'm selling a $3 ramen, value added, which sells maybe at 3 1/4, but it's only costing me $1.50, and I've just added 100% free weight to the product. So again, using our wisdom and our mindset, we have to work smarter, not harder. I believe in working really hard also. So I created these products, and then the ultimate thing for me was I actually went to Mondelez, who owned Oreo, Nilla, and all those brands, and it took me about 1.5 years, but I convinced them to give me the brand. Because SunTree, I had an unknown brand, and it takes 40 years these days to break in with a brand, it seems like. So how could I do it? I started co-branding, so like when you look at our bags, SunTree is on the top, and Oreo cookie is the bottom. So all of a sudden, we're branded and co-branded with the top names in the industry. That's how I built the company with a lot of hard work, dedication, and about 1,000 battles that you couldn't bear and I couldn't go into today. But ultimately was able to sell the companies. The point being there, something old with something new and having a different perspective and a different mindset. And so that is the vision that I've always had. But within that, and this is where I want to challenge you very quickly, a lot of things I wanted to go through, but who is the benefactor of your products? You know, today we're in a world of iPhone, YouTube, it's old, but MySpace, but you see a few familiar words there. I, my, you. Everything is about the consumer. Let's indulge people who love to indulge themselves. But in my life, what I figured out is the way I was blessed and the way I did well is I would figure out how I was going to make you a superstar, how I was going to make you wealthy, and how I'd make you rich. You know, most people want to figure out how they can get rich themselves. But what I learned is if you can't serve another person's vision, then you can't have your own vision. So if I was talking to a Costco buyer, I didn't come into him, hey, I'm selling nuts, seeds, dried fruits, and I'll save you a nickel. Or I'll even give you a new product. It was like, I used to have one line. You know what my job is? To make you a hero. Unless it was a business owner. See, that's what I would tell people who are working for the company, because real frankly, they don't care half the time if the company makes money or not, as long as they get their paycheck. But they care about being made a hero because they move up in the company. Then I would tell people who are owners, my job is to make you a fortune. If I make you a fortune, make you a hero, guess what's going to happen in my business? It's going to explode and go through the roof. So I rode the coattails of making other people successful. I managed their business. I figured out, most people today, if they sell me a product, as long as I pay for it, they don't care if I throw it in the trash, if it goes in the ocean, if it rots, as long as they get paid. But I always made sure that someone made money with my products, because if they did, what were they going to do? Come back for more. You know, Costco became one of my customers. It was very hard to acquire and work my way in. And then after having them, I built the business to about $15 million a year. That year, we would do contracts where I would sell them the almonds, and on the same day I would procure with the farmers. And so I would have the input, and I would sell it, and we'd build in the spread. And as it would happen with commodities, and they sometimes do, there was a disaster in the crop, and the price shot up over 50 cents a pound on the same day that Costco just committed to several million pounds, and I had these firm commitments in hand from the grower. Well, Costco, of course, confirmed it. They're not stupid, so they grabbed it real quick, and half of my growers backed out, even though it was firm commitments. And at that time, I had to decide what to do. And I wound up going out and buying the almonds at the market price and supplying Costco. I let them know about it, but I lost about $1.6 million on that one transaction. And at that time, my company was only making about $2 million a year. So I knew I was going to work for free for a year just to honor that commitment. What's amazing is I did honor it, and they didn't pat me on the back or say anything. But those buyers moved up within the Costco organization. And over the next 3 years, my business with Costco grew to over $60 million. So the point being is I wasn't doing it to get more business. I was doing it to do the right thing. But in doing the right thing, what happened is by seeing that they were taken care of, I don't make my problems other people's problems. I was blessed. So it's very important in that. I always tell people, to lose money, you've lost nothing. If you lose your name, you've lost more. If you lose your character, you've lost everything. So that's the most important. So I always tell people, what is the business you're doing for? Is it you're passionate about it? Are you helping people? Are you loving it? Or is it only for the money? Because if it's only for the money, it's very, very difficult to sustain. It's great. I always tell people there's two types of people who want to make money and people who have a lot of money. And the people who want to make money have a big advantage over the people who have it. Because you see, if you don't have it yet, even when you're miserable in your life, you're thinking, but if I get it, I'll be happy. The problem is the people who already have it know that that's not true, and they have nowhere to go because they've already got it and they're still not happy. You know, as Jeff said, I live in an amazing house, and there's only one reason for it. It was because it was a $42 million property and I got it for $17 million. It was a good investment. No other reason. I don't like to, in fact, I actually detest parts of it because for all the things I do all over the world with orphanages and good things and amazing things, most people know me as the person who bought Tyler Perry's mansion. But, you know, we have it for a moment in time. It's great when I have it, and I don't care if I don't. Because that's not what I'm about. And that's one of the points I want to share with you today. Are you looking for significance or are you looking for success? You know, success can be monetized, and that's great. And I'm not against that. I'm not saying we have to be poor. I've been blessed. I have my own private plane. I have an incredible house, and we do amazing things. But it's small compared to actually what I give in my life and the millions of dollars and what I do with ministry orphanages and things all over the world. And for everything I do, I don't take $1 for it. So I use my businesses to fund the things that I'm doing in my life. And that's so important because it gave purpose to my life. So many things I've seen, so many miracles and so many things happen. But the least of it is making money. So it's great, make money, be successful and do all that, but have a vision of who you are and where you're going, because otherwise you're just going to be in an abyss. And the most disappointing day you'll have is the day you get there. I'm telling you right now. I see it not in my life because of the significant things, but I see it in so many other people's lives, and then they're just completely lost, which is when I love to step in and speak to them and help them. So brings me to the last section of what I want to share and some exciting stuff, but it's a section I'm just calling believe and have faith. First of all, have faith in yourself. Believe in what you can do. If I learned one thing, like I said, I had an alcoholic stepfather who beat me and told me my whole life I'd be nothing. I was that wave on the ocean that was out there that you could have looked with binoculars and you weren't going to find a ripple out there. I was nothing, I was nobody. And I always like to encourage people, don't let anybody tell you what you can't do. Because if you can vision it, if you can believe it, I say, he who sees the impossible, he who sees the invisible will do the impossible. So you can't see the wind, you can't see belief, but you can have it. When you have it, you're going to do the impossible. Great things. I listen to people, to their ideas, their understanding, but then within myself, I figure out what it is that I'm supposed to be doing, and I don't let anybody tell me that it can't happen and that it won't be possible. Whatever you believe, whatever you dream, you can do it. You know, one of my favorite things I learned early on, Robert Frost's poem, "Two roads diverged." It says, and I took the one less traveled by, and it made all the difference. That's what made the difference in my life. And that other road, different perspective and contrary to what people do, it'll make all the difference in your life. I tell people, Mark chapter 8, verse 36 and 37 in the Bible, it says, what good is it if we gain the whole world, but we lose our soul? So very important, faith in yourself, very important, faith in God, understanding what that is. My book that I want to tell you, it was a vision that I was given, and it's called Seeds of Faith, which is great because there's an almond tree on the front. So Seeds of Faith tied in with my business, but also it was the faith side of my life. And without going into it, I'll just tell you, I'm going to share with you one great miracle. But when I was 36 years old, I actually had 2 major sicknesses in my body. I cried out in prayer, and I had 2 miracle healings. I wound up getting to start praying for people, and literally you can Google me, look it up, and believe whatever you want or not, but wherever I go all over the world, people get healed. So I travel, and I've seen blind eyes open, deaf ears open, people get out of wheelchairs. It's amazing. That's the joy that I have in my life, and that's why I go where I do. So the theme that I was given for this book that I felt like God gave me was, every man can count the seeds that will come from a fruit, but God alone can count the fruit that will come from a seed. So when you cast your bread on the water, you can't even begin to understand the blessings and the things that will come forth. When I was young, we have a few more minutes and I want to get to a very significant miracle that with this farming thing. But when I was young, I was 16, and it was funny because I had an uncle who I thought was wealthy. He had a couple $1 million, and I was in awe of him. I was only around him twice in my life, but when he was there, I couldn't even breathe. I thought he was so successful. It was funny, my perspective today versus then. But I couldn't breathe. And he sits down with me one time on the sofa, and he says to me, and he was just a very worldly guy, but he says to me, what's your goal? And I thought to myself, my goal at that time was I wanted to make $1 million by the time I was 30. But I wasn't going to open my mouth and say that to him because I thought, my family made $20,000 a year. He's going to think, what a stupid kid. Who would have a crazy goal like that? That's what I thought, so I didn't want to say it. All of a sudden, I get the courage and I say, I want to make $1 million when I'm 30. And I'll never forget that moment because he looked at me and he said, why do you think so small? It was a really amazing moment in my life. So I tell people all the time, and I want to tell you this today, so many times people come to me wherever I am and they say, should I do this, should I do that? I don't know what to do. And I want to tell you today, you already know what to do. Many times in our life, inside, we know what to do, but the problem is we're thinking of how hard it's going to be, the consequences, ramifications, difficulties, how impossible it seems. And those are the things that cloud us to say we're confused. I don't know if I should do this or that. But I encourage you, there's a place inside where you can just think about one thing. Not, is this going to be hard? Is this going to be popular? But what am I supposed to do right now? And you will find that inside yourself. And then I say, have the courage when you find that thing to just go do it. I tell people to take practical steps. There's 10 rungs to a ladder. And I would say, in the business world, the first rung is 30 feet in the air. The second one's 15. The third one is 10 feet, and then it's a foot apart, and you run up to level 10. The problem is most people are on the ground, they're thinking about level 10, and they never spend their energy getting to level 1. So, it's funny, we had a maid recently, and she told me, I want to make $1 million, and I'd be the last person to laugh at that because that was my goal, and I encourage that. But she's telling me all these dreams, but I wasn't trying to be funny, but I said to her, I believe you can get there. I can help you if you want to listen to me. But can I tell you the first thing I think you should do? Try to show up for work on time and try to work 5 days in a row without taking a day off. See, so many of us, we're thinking about this big vision up here, but we're not doing the fundamentals that get us to the first rung. Amen? Very important to understand that. 2 last things, my Chuck Yeager story. I always say Chuck Yeager, he broke the sound barrier. All these people, they're like Mach 0.96, 97, 98, and the plane is shaking, it's vibrating, it's falling apart, and they would just back down and turn back. Chuck Yeager gets in the test plane, gets to the same point, 0.96, 97, 98, and the whole plane is shaking, vibrating, falling apart, and what does he do? He hits the throttle. When he hits the throttle and he breaks through the sound barrier, it was all of a sudden sonic boom, and it was smooth as glass. So in our lives, I want to encourage you, in most of my life, I feel like I've spent my life living at Mach 0.96, shaking tremendously and feeling like the plane's falling apart. But what I learned is I never back down. Never back down. I hit the throttle and I break that sound barrier, and I don't care who agrees or disagrees. You're going with me for the ride or you're not, but I literally push straight through it. So last thing I want to share with you is an amazing miracle in my life. 7, 8 years ago, I literally heard a voice within, I believe it was the voice of God, but whatever it was, saying, you're going into farming. And I was in manufacturing and doing ministry, and I was like, yeah, that sounds great, God, but all my money's tied up in my businesses, and what's not I use for ministry, so orchards are pretty expensive. And I literally felt like God was speaking to me and saying, I'm going to give you land that's barren, and you're going to pray over it, and I'm going to give you water. Because barren land is $500 an acre, and land with water is $15,000 an acre before you even do the irrigation, plant it. So an orchard would cost you like $30,000 an acre. And I thought, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I think I'll buy 50 acres and try that, and if water appears, man, that would be amazing. And I wait about 3 to 4 years, and all of a sudden I see this piece of land. It's in Arizona in the middle of the desert, a place called San Simon right on the New Mexico border, and it's 2,300 acres. I felt like I was supposed to buy it. And it was only $500 an acre because there's no water. It's literally cattle grazing land. And I think we have a picture of it somewhere, right here. So, and I was reading my Bible, and I get this verse, Isaiah 43, 18 to 21, where God says, behold, I'm doing a new thing. I'll give you water in the desert and a road in the wilderness. So I'm hearing this. I'm thinking, I might be, a little delusional, but this is what I'm thinking. So I buy this 2,300 acres of land, and the only one with more faith than me is my wife, because most wives, if you're married, they kill you if you spent $1.2 million on basically swampland in Florida. So there's no water. We send out for a test, and it's $30,000 to do a test for water. They tested it, not a drop of water. And it had been tested by these other people many times. That's why they sold the land. It was useless. So I wait 3 months. I'm prayerful, and I send them out to do a second test. $30,000, no water. And literally, it's like buying a new Mercedes, not putting insurance on it, and just driving it off the cliff. And it's not fun. So I wait 3 more months. This time I'm like, God, I'm only doing this one more time. I pray for 3 months. And Keith, who's with me today, he's part of our ministry, and he runs it. He's out there. We send these well diggers. They dig, they hit 800 feet. Not only we hit water, but we hit artesian water that without a pump came up by itself. I think that's a video if you put it on. And this is the land, what it looked like with the desert. And then the water flooded the desert for 3 miles. And you can see it running. So we hit this water. When they tested it, now mind you, this land has been tested many times, no water. When they tested it, we not only hit water and artesian water, you know what they told me we had? A 4,000-year aquifer underneath our property. Literally, it's a lake. I mean, it's like missing Lake Erie underneath your property. And then we have a couple more pictures, but so we didn't know what we were doing. I've never farmed in my life. In fact, my wife won't even let me touch the plants at our house. And they died. And we bought these big cat tractors, and we cleared this land ourselves. We're burning everything, and you see the pictures, and then that's what it looks like flattened out. It's 17 miles contiguous, this land. And then we put in the irrigation, we planted it. These are the trees we planted. And now I think we have a picture of the trees today. That's what they look like right now. They're 3 years old, and we're 2 years away from our first crop. Normally it takes 7 years, but in the farming processing we're believing we're gonna have our first crop after the 5th year. People who laughed at us and told us we didn't know anything, we were a bunch of city slickers, are now following what we're doing with farming trends. And all of a sudden they've stopped laughing at me, because they would just laugh at us. All the townspeople there, which is probably 12 people, it's in the middle of nowhere. They're making fun of, don't you know there ain't no water out there? You don't even need to go test it, we're telling you. And why I share that story with you tonight is because I always say, when our heart is right, even if our motive is right, even if our method is wrong and our timing is wrong, God will always help us. But when our motive and our heart is right, that'll happen. But if our heart and our motive is wrong, then we have no help. So I encourage you, if you get a chance, take the snacks and eat them, you'll enjoy them. But take the book, Seeds of Faith. This is just a couple moments to glean from some of the things I've learned. Every one of my businesses and every story that happened in my life is just hundreds upon hundreds of stories of things that brought me the life lessons, and I believe that it can be transforming and encouraging for your life. So God bless y'all. Thanks for taking time.